The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I rise to take the opportunity to put Labour's position on this bill. It is with some sadness that we cannot support this bill. We have a proud history in dairy industry legislation going back from the 30s. We formed Fonterra when we came into government, and we would have liked to have voted for this bill. In the end, while there has been much discussion, good discussion within the Labour Party caucus, the refusal by the government to support a legislated cap on the fund size, a fund that Fonterra have said themselves is critical in terms of its total size, critical to the management pressures and direction of Fonterra, but the government refuses to put in place a legislated cap. Mr Speaker, the Minister went through the timing of the bill. It was a rushed process. Thankfully, through its own mismanagement, it allowed farmers to vote on TAF before the legislation has progressed through the House, and for that we welcome the National Government's incompetence. Mr Speaker, the outcome of that vote was confusing. The Minister himself misleads the House by saying that 66.45% of shareholders voted for TAF. No. The vote based on milk solids was 66.5% of those who voted. The estimates, and Fonterra refuses to give the figures on this, are about 50% of the farmers who voted for, and about 50% voted against. That is not a clear mandate, and that is why Labour is concerned that the government's position on this has been to refuse to put in place a legislated protection for what is the largest and the most successful company and arguably industry in this country, bar none, owned for the most part by New Zealand farmers, something that we should be quite proud of. Mr Speaker, Fonterra themselves say that they will manage the investment fund. This is the opportunity for non-farmers to buy units in our biggest company at about 7 to 12% of total share capital value. New Zealand Stock Exchange outgoing CEO, of course, Mark Weldon, commented that actually until the fund gets to 20%, it's not going to operate efficiently. My concern is that tension that will be there from day one is unlikely to be managed by the board or by farmers, and without a legislated cap could very well see that unit fund blow out to a figure that is beyond critical, that is beyond the level that Fonterra themselves say is wise and prudent in terms of the long-term objectives of a cooperative company. This is an unusual company, Mr Speaker. I acknowledge here and now that in 2001, when we put Fonterra in place, we established a fair value share for a cooperative. That in itself was unusual. And we did put in place open entry and open exit provisions that brought discipline on management to ensure they held the confidence of farmer supplier shareholders. Mr Speaker, we are changing that through this legislation, and that is the risk that in spite of the global financial crisis, this company has grown, has improved its equity, has come back from a near crisis on its balance sheet in 2007 to a position of strength under the existing structure. This bill is about to change that. And it is important that farmers realise exactly what is going on. Yes, in the House I did say that Sir Henry van der Hayden's statement in 2010 in a consultation document that, quote, "Trading among farmers gets rid of redemption risk once and for all, which makes every farmer's investment in Fonterra more secure." That is a lie. I repeat the statement, because in the due diligence report released in 2012, a summary of quite a lot of work that went on states that balance sheet cover of $120 to $200 million will be required under TAF to manage fund size significantly lower than the 500 to 850 million of cover required to manage redemption risk. The point being, redemption risk remains with the company at a lower level. But what we have through the passage of this bill is some added risks to the company. We had an independent advisor to the Select Committee. The advisors that came from MED and from Ministry of Primary Industries were competition advisors. They were skilled in the area of contestability of competition and the commerce law. They did not understand cooperatives and the basic objectives. Our independent advisor, James Morrison, in his report to the committee says, and I must quote, "This investor-supplier conflict of interest is why every cooperative that has introduced external investors to its capital structure has either eventually demutualised or reverted back to a full cooperative by excluding the external investors. Farmers should be under no illusion that this is going to protect and strengthen their cooperative. There are pressures that will build, ultimately I think from within the cooperative, under difficult times of trading, international prices coming down, Mr. Speaker, and the concern is that bankers may force farmers to seek full value in their share. In fact, in the fallback provisions in the bill around share valuation, where there was much debate around what we call Clause 77A, that was, should this cooperative be driven by cooperative principles, which are basically nominal value shareholding? It can be a changing nominal value, but the fair value provisions and concept that we introduced in 2001 is faulty. What this bill had attempted to do was to change the fair value provisions in the absence of TAF. And indeed, without the endorsement of the Shareholders' Council, TAF cannot be introduced. There is a legal requirement for the Shareholders' Council, approximately 35 farmers, shareholding farmers, who have the responsibility to provide oversight and a watchdog process for Fonterra Board. They have to sign off and endorse this concept. They have not done so yet. They need to be fully aware that we have to have a fair process for the establishment of the value of the share if they don't endorse TAF. And indeed, if through this legislation the fund was to be wound up, Mr. Speaker, and what we have done in this bill is tried to compromise on the tension between officials who wanted full value shareholding, full value shares, open value shares in Fonterra, and the intention of the Select Committee was to have a cooperative value share, and I'm sure that the Chairman of the Committee will outline that even further. Mr. Speaker, the last provision in here is the milk price provisions, and that is that we have a raw milk price which enables independent competitors to come and buy milk on a contestable basis from other farmers and get on and innovate. And we welcome that and we want that. A complex milk price manual and milk price panel arrangement will be set up to try and do the best for Fonterra and the dairy industry. Mr. Speaker, in summary, Labor would like to support this bill, but we choose not to on the basis that the government has refused to put in a basic legislative protection for what is the single biggest and most successful company in this country. Mr. Speaker, we wonder why this is happening. John Key is on record saying he would like to see Fonterra floated. We hope that does not happen. We have seen shares in numerous entities across this country. We will see them in SOEs. Shares go into overseas ownership, control eventually drift into overseas ownership. We do not want that to happen for Fonterra, our single biggest company, Mr. Speaker, and we hope that the board of Fonterra has the best intentions to provide and maximise the return to farmer shareholders, not to provide and maximise the return to the outside investors who will be now part of Fonterra New Zealand's biggest cooperative company.
The Honourable John Banks.